We've all heard about intermittent fasting over the past few years as a new trend in the diet community. But does it work as a weight loss method? Is it safe? And how can I do it? In this video, I'm going to talk about the science behind intermittent fasting, provide a step-by-step guide to intermittent fasting, and also common pitfalls to avoid in order to be successful. I've heard people stressing the importance of intermittent fasting not being a diet but simply as a change of the eating time. While it is technically true, the proportion of each macronutrients are equally important in intermittent fasting, and I would explain it further later in this video. Before we understand how the diet works, first we have to understand how our body stores fat in the first place. Our ancestors managed to survive with severe scarcity of food as our body is very efficient in storing energy as fat and glycogen. But when we try to lose weight by tapping into that energy source, the body urges us to consume more food instead. That's why in general it's much harder to lose weight than to gain weight. The two major hormones in your body to regulate the level of blood glucose is insulin and glucagon. When there's a high blood glucose level, such as after a carbohydrate-heavy meal, insulin is secreted to bring down the glucose level. While the blood sugar level is low, glucagon is secreted to bring the sugar level up. When we talk about weight loss, we are most concerned with insulin since it is also the main anabolic hormone in the body. Anabolic means that insulin tends to encourage the building of large molecules such as fat and glycogen from smaller molecules such as fatty acid and glucose. The main functions of insulin is therefore to stimulate the production of glycogen and fat from glucose and fatty acid, and at the same time decrease the breakdown of glycogen and fat. We should briefly discuss the two main fuel sources in our body, glycogen and fat. When we eat under the action of insulin, glucose is first converted into glycogen in the liver and the skeletal muscle. All the excess energy is then transported to fat cells to be converted into fat. When we need energy to carry out our day-to-day activities, the body first taps into the easily accessible glycogen, and then subsequently fat. However, there is one major caveat. To break down fat into usable fuel, our body utilizes an enzyme called the insulin-sensitive lipase. And if our body has a high level of insulin, this lipase is inhibited and no energy can be derived from your body fat. Instead, your body will make you ravenously hungry to encourage you to eat. Simply put, a state of high insulin encourages storage of fat in the body, and a state of low insulin encourages the body to use fat as fuel. Low carbohydrate diet, ketogenic diet, and intermittent fasting all are similar in the sense that they all aim at maintaining a constantly low level of insulin throughout the day to encourage the body to utilize fat as a fuel source. I believe most of you do not need convincing about the effectiveness of intermittent fasting, so now comes the practical part. I know, this sounds stupid and a lot of work, but hear me out. First off, have you ever wondered why people who have lost weight, especially those who have lost a lot of weight, tend to gain them back in the end? It's true that once you got fat, your body has certain adaptations, such as increasing the number of fat cells, and this tends to increase your weight even after you got thinner. But other than that, your body doesn't really have a magical memory of your previous weight. Therefore, the main problem is that after losing weight, people think that the job is done and they just move on to having their normal diet again, which is counterproductive as this is what got them fat in the first place. That's why it's important first to know your current eating habit before anything should be done. You don't have to show your journal to anyone, so please be honest with yourself. Just rough estimates will do, like a pack of chips instead of 300 grams of potato. Do it for 3 days and I bet you will already gain a better understanding of what your eating habit is. Do also record how you feel each meal, it will help you get through tough times. It's a good place to start precisely because this is the most easily overlooked aspect of any diet. The calories inside drinks are relatively invisible, and it is much easier to consume 500 calories in drinks than in solid food. Try to stick to water as much as possible. If you are a coffee drinker, you can stick to the black ones. Tea drinkers can also go ahead with unsweetened tea. If you really miss soda, try soda water. Add a lemon slice or two and it is virtually indistinguishable from a Coke Light. Oh, and speaking of Coke Light, don't be fooled by the zero sugar label on some sodas. The artificial sweeteners, such as aspartame, have been shown in some studies to ironically lead to weight gain, obesity, and heart disease. Although some other papers, predominantly the ones funded by the soda industry, claim the opposite, I would suggest to be on the safe side and cut sodas from your diet completely. Sugar is the easy culprit as it gives the strongest stimulation to insulin secretion. The advice is easy: completely cut sugar from your diet. The hard part is, the number of food with sugar as a component is insanely huge. Sometimes they are under the disguise of other names such as fructose and corn syrup. Personally, I find sticking to the unprocessed food makes it much easier as there is fewer ways for food manufacturers to put sugar in it. As I previously mentioned, low carb, keto and IF are all insulin lowering diets that will all give you results. Therefore, we can slowly ease into IF by first going through low carb and then keto. You follow the previous step and you are already halfway to the low carb diet. Now try to decrease the amount of carbs. Not all carbs are created equal, and generally the processed carbs such as pasta, white rice and noodles are the worst. Try to cut down on the consumption. You will inevitably feel hungrier, so try to drink 2 cups of warm water before a meal and also add more vegetables into the mix and make it more filling. This step is optional. If you are already doing a low carb diet, then you are already adapted to a consistently low level of insulin and you can already try intermittent fasting. However, some people find it easier to first adapt to a ketogenic diet, which essentially have the same effect as IF as there is minimal insulin secretion. Basically, a ketogenic diet means a complete abstinence from carbohydrate and a moderate amount of protein and of course lots and lots of fat. I bet you didn't expect a video on intermittent fasting with intermittent fasting being on the 6th step of the algorithm. Personally, I think it is a more logical approach. I'm not comfortable telling people to immediately jump into IF, not because IF is dangerous, but because we are just not used to not eating 3 meals a day. A logical first step will be to skip breakfast or dinner to achieve the 16 to 8 schedule, with 16 hours a day of fasting and 8 hours a day of eating. By this point you will probably see some results and might be more than happy to stick to this eating schedule. But if you would like to turn up a notch, you may try the 20:4 ratio and even a 1 meal a day. Now you know what to do, it's time for some pitfalls to avoid and some misconceptions to clear. This is the biggest concern everyone has about IF. Fasting for 1 day or less is generally safe. Long-term fasting are relatively problematic. As we eat, we don't just take in carbs, fat and protein. There are also vitamins, sodium ions, potassium ions and a lot more. In fact, our body has a daily requirement of sodium ions of around 2 millimole per kg and potassium ions of around 1 millimole per kg. So if you weigh 70 kilograms, just drinking water for a day will set you 140 millimole of sodium down and 70 millimole of potassium down. Hyponatremia, or a low level of blood sodium level, will give you headache, dizziness and even nausea. Hypokalemia, or a low level of blood potassium level, is much more dangerous. It can mess with your heartbeat and even cause cardiac arrest. Fortunately, you can easily negate the effect of hyponatremia by adding some sea salt into the water and drink some bone broth here and there. And our body has a relatively huge reserve for potassium ions, so low potassium level is relatively unlikely. However, I would recommend not to attempt long fast on your own, as it is relatively unsustainable and missing key vitamins and electrolytes for a long time might also be dangerous. After not eating for a while, there's a natural tendency to gorge when you start eating. We might even convince ourselves that we deserve the extra food for resisting food all day. But the truth is, you can offset your day's work by eating loads of carbs and sugar in one meal. So if you are doing 1 meal a day, I would suggest you to plan your meal in advance, get the vegetables, chicken and some beans ready, drink some water and go slowly. No, you cannot outtrain a bad diet. I'm glad you asked. Many people treat weight loss as a target to achieve, while in fact, weight loss is more like a lifestyle to maintain. Remember, the normal diet that you're used to is exactly what got you to this stage in the first place. Any weight loss plan is essentially a quest to change a lifetime of bad eating habits. That's why I suggest sticking to a 16:8 ratio or at most 1 meal a day schedule. It is better because you can sustain it. It is completely normal to fall off the wagon once in a while. Besides, you don't want to be the one ruining a birthday party, a family dinner, Thanksgiving, etc. by being the only one who has to avoid this and that because you can't eat that or your eating time is still 4 hours away. It is okay to feast once in a while, just make sure you stick to your eating plan the very next day and it will be fine. So let's recap. You should first start a food journal to record your eating habits. You should stick to water and unsweetened tea or coffee. Try eliminating sugar completely from the diet. Decrease the amount of carbohydrate to achieve a low-carb diet, and then you can attempt a 16:8 intermittent fasting schedule by skipping either breakfast or dinner. Do drink some water with salt if you feel dizzy or slightly nauseated. And it is fine to break your streak once in a while, just make sure to resume the fasting as soon as possible. So, have you ever tried intermittent fasting? What's your experience with it? Please let me know down in the comment section.